I've seen a lot of comparisons between Diablo 4 and Path of Exile. However, in a way, it's not fair to directly compare these games. How can we expect Diablo 4, a game that just released, to have the same amount of content as a game that's been in development for over a decade? So instead I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be comparing the very first league of PoE to the first season of D4. That's right, I'm going to be comparing League of Anarchy to Season of the Malignant. So before I really take a deep dive into this, I want to get a couple things out of the way. First of all, this video will mainly only be discussing content that was added, not the long list of bug fixes or balances that the games brought. Think of this as more of a macro level of content and not a micro level comparison video. Secondly, the footage seen on screen for PoE is from current day Path of Exile, because Season of Anarchy was released over 10 years ago, and unfortunately I was not making content at that time and I don't really have any recorded footage of the game from way back when. With those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into this. The corruption of Rayclast has spread to the minds of many exiles, turning them against one another. As you journey through the world, you will occasionally run into these exiles, deadly computer-controlled enemies who use the skills and items available to player character. If you manage to kill one, they drop a lot of items, including a magic or above for each equipable slot. So yes, the first theme of the PoE League was Rogue Exiles. Basically exiles that were out for your blood. And you could have come across these guys anywhere in the world, including maps. So it was sort of like all the way through the leveling process and into the end game, you could enjoy the seasonal theme. And having them drop items in every slot may seem like overkill or redundant in today's gaming landscape, but you have to remember in 2013, PoE was a very different game and it was actually harder to fully equip your character. So this was a welcome change to the fan base. But let's switch gears and look at the theme for the first season of Diablo 4. A dire threat emerges. A new form of Lilith's corruption has spread throughout Sanctuary, creating malignant monsters that roam the land, overtaken with this infectious turmoil. Minds lost and killing at random. Only you can fight back and harness the power of this twisted corruption to uncover the source of the malignance and put it to an end. So yes, throughout the world you will encounter corrupted monsters. After killing them, you have the option to begin a ritual to bring them back alive. Upon slaying them the second time, they dropped a corrupt heart. These hearts can be socketed into your jewelry, giving you new powers and passives, changing up your play style. And it's not just throughout the world where you can find these monsters. There's even malignant tunnels, basically corrupted dungeons, allowing you to find these hearts in a more efficient way. So to compare the themes, I will say up front, it does sound like D4 has a lot more to offer. After all, from the description, it certainly seems that way. However, to be honest, both of these seasons or leagues or whatever you want to call them were pretty lackluster in my opinion. I would say I think fighting the Rogue Exiles was more fun in PoE compared to the Malignant monsters, simply because killing the monster and then bringing it back to life really slows down the action in my opinion, and that's something I really do not enjoy in an ARPG. And while the Malignant tunnels sounds interesting, the problem is dungeons are boring in D4 altogether, and these don't really add much to that, so they're kind of just like a regular dungeon with Malignant monsters. They're nothing special. That being said, I think the reward of the heart is much better than just finding more loot like PoE offered. So I would say PoE had more of a fun factor, but D4 wins in the reward factor. So it's kind of like a 1-to-1. pretty much at this point. However, killing corrupted monsters was just half of the fun, as both of these new patches brought new items to the game. In PoE, we got 6 new base item types, as well as some new uniques. 2 shared between the Onslaught League and the Anarchy League, 2 exclusive to the Onslaught League, and 2 exclusive to the Anarchy League. That's right, PoE had dual leagues at that time. Onslaught was for the hardcore crowd, and softcore was the Anarchy League. And it wasn't just a difference in name. Onslaught, there was other changes to the game, such as faster attack speed, cast speed, and movement speed of the monsters was dramatically increased. Diablo, on the other hand, has introduced 6 new uniques and 7 new legendary items. Basically a new unique, 1 for each class, and 1 ultra rare unique. So yeah, just 6 new uniques. As ultra rare items, the drop rate is so low that they may as well be non-existent at the game, at least at this point. So in terms of loot, during the season, I think Diablo 4 wins during the season. Because the new uniques are cool, but really the hearts, why not technically pieces of loot, are still part of gear, sort of like gems. And they do add a ton of new powers that make the game even better to play. At least I think so. However, for long-term health and providing more of a way forward, PoE wins hands down. Those new base items really help the developers expand upon the loot tables and build diversity and different gear that you could put in your slots. So in the long run, for the health of the game, the new loot added in the first league of PoE, I think is going to help the game more, or did help the game more than we'll see the new heart system in Diablo 4. Because once the season is done, they're taking those away. So yeah, like I said before, I think both of these were pretty lackluster for a game's first season or first league in terms of content added to the game. Though I think D4 might have a slight edge over the first league of PoE. But if you put it in perspective, Path of Exile was still in early access during its first league. It was from a much smaller team with much less resources. And the standards in 2013 were much lower than they are today. After all, it is a decade later. So Diablo, with all of its vast resources at their disposal and other games to learn from on the market, and the competition is much higher, I don't understand why their first season was so lackluster that we could start to compare it to leagues from games that were in early access 10 years ago. It just doesn't make sense to me. In my opinion, D4 is still an early access or an open paid beta, whatever you want to call it. And this first season was mainly to address bug fixes and to sell a battle pass. I think by season 3 or 4 is when the game should have been released. Whereas Path of Exile, a lot of people overlooked the problem, especially in the early days, because it was an early access and the developers were upfront about that. And they weren't trying to sell you a full price game claiming it was ready to go. But I would love to hear what you all think. What do you guys think of the first season of D4? Do you think it really lived up to expectations? And how do you think it stacked up against the first league of PoE? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you made it this far and did enjoy the video, let me know by dropping a like. And if you are new, please consider subscribing. As for me, I got a ton of work to do, so I'm gonna get back to the grind and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.